Welcome to Women of the World, a show which gives a voice to women from around the world who have chosen to make the United States their home. Our show believes in the principles written on and enshrined by the Statue of Liberty. Here's today's moderator, Ann McKenna.
Hello, viewers. My name is Ann McKenna, moderating the show today. Welcome. I have the honor to introduce to you an amazing guest to our show today, but first allow me a moment to introduce to you our co-host. Starting with Dawn, if you would please introduce yourself to us.
Of course. I'm Dawn Tomlinson, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. You're welcome. And how about you, Gloria? Hi.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here, Ann. I'm Gloria Van Demmeltrot. Delighted to visit with our guest today.
Awesome. It's good to have you in the studio today.
Thank you.
And now I have the honor to introduce to you Tai Goodwin, who is our guest to the studio. She's an author and an entrepreneur. She has written an amazing book called Girlfriend, It's Your Time, that we are all excited to hear about. Welcome to the studio, Tai.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you all today.
Tell us a little bit about this amazing book to start with.
Sure. Girlfriend, It's Your Time. It was actually born of a bunch of blog posts that I used to write. Back when I was a teacher, I used to get panic attacks every Sunday night.
Oh.
I was so anxious about going into the classroom. And so I used to write myself these Monday morning pep talks. And I turned that into blog posts and then finally put those blog posts into a book. And those pep talks were all notes to myself about owning my brilliance, being confident, really things that I needed to hear in order to get over that anxiety.
Oh, what a fascinating topic. Where did you teach and what did you teach, Tai?
I taught in Baltimore County and I taught 5th grade.
5th grade. Okay. Did it work for you? Did it work?
Being a teacher?
Yeah, well, in these, the blogs that you wrote, the little comments about inspiring you for that day and getting through the problems of teaching 5th graders, did it work?
It absolutely did. You know, it allowed me to change my perspective. It also allowed me to go after what I really wanted. You know, I thought teaching, I was going to change the world. I was ambitious. You know, I had done AmeriCorps for 2 years in Philadelphia, and I thought I'm going to go into the classroom. I'm going to show these teachers how to do it right. That lasted for about 2 years.
You're right.
And I decided I don't have the cape or the boots to be that kind of superhero. And so I had to have the courage, though, to decide that I wanted to leave teaching, because when you go to school, you take the test, you put in all of that time.
Yes.
It's hard to make a decision to leave that, especially when people hear you're a teacher and they're like, wow, that's great, that's awesome. But I just didn't like it. It just wasn't for me.
Interesting. So what did you go to then? What's your next adventure?
Well, I'd say I went to the dark side of corporate America. But I actually took those teaching skills and I just did it for big people. So I went into corporate America working for companies like CA Technologies and Barnes & Noble, and I was in the training department. So I was still teaching.
Right.
But I was teaching bigger people and I was making more money, which is one of the plights that a lot of teachers face, is that we don't pay teachers enough.
You know, that's interesting you said that, because when you were telling us you went to corporate, the first thing I thought of was, you know, training would be perfect to transfer those skills. Was that transition pretty easy for you?
It was. It really was, because it's the same principles about how people learn, how you get people's attention, and how you create content that helps people address those needs. And so it was a very easy transition.
One of the things that I read that you said is that a lot of times we go to try helping people that are below us, and you said something to the effect that sometimes we forget about reaching out to people that we think are above us. If you are making $50,000, you try to reach those people making $50,000 or less, and we forget that the people making a 6-figure also need the gift that we have. Could you please talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And there's a connection to this in the classroom as well as being an entrepreneur. So a lot of the women that I work with, when they want to start a business, they're always thinking, I pulled myself up, I'm going to help the next woman, and that's what I'm going to build my business around. But if you're working on helping people, figure out how to manage their money, someone who makes $50,000 needs help, but so does someone who makes six figures. There's a lot of people who make six figures who are living paycheck to paycheck. And we don't always think about that. We're always looking back, and sometimes there are people that are higher or above that need that same help. And it's the same thing in the classroom. One of the things I was very frustrated with was that there was always programs to help the kids that were failing. But if you're smart, if you're not failing, you get the least attention. And it's like you're kind of left, to fend for yourself. And so that same principle is that it's not always the people who are struggling that need help. The people that are successful, they can need help too.
That is such a good point. That's
really
such a good
is.
point. I think that's something that a lot of us, like you said, don't really think of naturally. It's not the first thought that comes to our mind. How did you come to that conclusion? What was that thought process?
It was looking at how to make money in business. I wanted to be profitable in my business, and I was taking a look at who are the people that are willing and able to pay me. And that's a question that I do with folks all the time when they talk about wanting to start a business. And a perfect example is a client of mine. She wanted to work with nonprofits. And she kept saying, but nonprofits don't have any money. And I said, well, if you're meeting people in the grocery store who are coming up to you saying that they want to start a nonprofit, you're right. They're not going to have any money. But I know plenty of nonprofits that have $1 million budgets. And so it was that thinking that it's only the people who can afford you. No, there are plenty of people who have money and they're willing to invest it. You just have to be willing to look for those people.
So you're expanding the vocabulary and the definitions of how people approach things.
Absolutely. Everybody needs help. And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book is that a lot of times women, we feel like we have to be strong, especially Black women. We have this persona that we're strong and that we don't break, but we need help. And it can be really hard if people are always thinking that you're strong. It can be really hard to ask for help. It's a very humbling thing, but we have to learn to do that.
And that's true for all women. That's true for all women. We look at our age differences. I'm obviously older than the rest of you. However, it's the same. We face the same issues. Would you share with us some of the examples of suggestions that you give women?
Sure. One of the examples that I give is learning to ask a question instead of defining your situation. And so here's what I mean by that. A lot of times we'll say, well, I just don't have the money. Well, you can stay in that attitude, or you can say, how can I? Right? What's possible? I hate my job, which is huge. I don't like going into a 9-to-5 Monday morning. I don't like it. Well, you can stay saying that over and over again, or you can say, well, what job would I like?
Right.
What do I need to get that job? How can I get there? And the more you start to ask questions, the more possibilities come up. You can ask yourself those questions, you can ask other people those questions, but it's a huge shift from just labeling your situation to having the courage to ask those questions and even having the courage to answer those questions.
Great information and absolutely wonderful. And how can I improve my situation for where I am now?
Absolutely.
What can I do? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So as you're saying this, I'm also thinking that in our lives we go through various stages. So when you're young, you're a child, and then you go to school. And when you were talking about going from a teacher position to something in the corporate world, it just struck me that so many of us go through different stages in our lives, and that we should really embrace that, because you just made it sound so positive and like it was such a great thing that happened to you. And can you talk about that transition just a little bit?
Yeah, and let me put a caveat on that. In the moment, it doesn't feel like a great thing.
Right.
It's
scary.
It is. And I'm one of those people who I don't really like change. I don't know a lot of people who do like change.
No.
And what I really hate is when you're in that when you're in that place where you're in transition,
Yes.
like where you know that A isn't working for you,
Right.
but you haven't quite figured out B,
Right.
and so you're stuck in the middle.
Right.
Right. Oh my goodness, that's so frustrating. But what I've learned is that I call them lessons learned. Right. We hear lessons lived, but I look at them as lessons learned.
Yes.
What have I learned from this experience? And one of the things that I started doing was looking at where I've made changes before and applying that to the change that I want to make now. You know, I've done this before, I've accomplished this before, so I can take that same skill, that same courage, and I can do it again, even if I'm not sure about what's going to happen next.
That's great. Taking the lessons that you've learned. And I think once you make the change one time, it inspires you that you can make more changes too. So in your writing career, what are the other books that you've written?
Well, I always say I've written like 2.5 books. I was a career coach for a while. So I actually wrote a book because I was telling my clients they should write books. So I actually wrote a book about changing your careers. And then I was part of another book that was around finding a business consultant. And I just wrote a chapter in that book.
Okay.
But I am working on another book that's in this series of Girlfriend, and it's called Girlfriend Check Yourself. And it's 31 days of self-reflection.
Self-reflection.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us about reflection. I mean, what's the purpose of self-reflecting?
You know, it really is about being self-aware. I think a lot of the things we do in our life, we do out of habit, or we do it because we watched our parents do it. And if you're not self-aware, you don't get to stop and say, hey, wait a minute, I want to change something. I got married when I moved to the Twin Cities. I've been here 9 winters now. And one of the things that I noticed was that when my daughter would come home from school, my husband, he would say, how was your day? What did you eat? He would ask her all these questions. And I hadn't been doing that. And so I was realizing that I am not having those small, meaningful conversations. And I'm thinking back when I grew up, my mom was working all the time. She didn't have time for that. But that was something that I learned. And so through self-reflection and saying, well, what's going on here? That's where you are able to break the chains, or you're able to change things that, you know, they were survival, but now you're trying to thrive in life. And if you're not really self-aware, you'll continue to do the same things over and over and over again.
I like that. You know, the connection between self-reflecting and making changes is so connected, and you do that so well, both in your writing and in coaching other people. What are the other things that you do other than, I mean, there's the coaching and there's the writing. What are other things that you do?
Taking improv classes. It's people think that I'm an extrovert. I am actually an introvert. I love teaching, but after I teach a class, I have to go home and curl up with the book because that recharges me. And so taking an improv class is actually kind of stepping out of my shell a little bit more. But I always practice what I preach. So, you know, I have to, if I'm telling my clients to do that, I have to do it myself. I started taking violin lessons.
Violin?
This year.
Oh, that's nice.
I've always wanted to play. It's my favorite instrument. And so I just decided to take violin lessons. And yes, I am the oldest person there, you know, and it's so hard, but I really, really love it.
Oh, how exciting. That's wonderful. It sounds like, well, you are a living example of what you're teaching others to do. Could you tell us a little about follow-up and how long the people that you're training are all excited and they're wanting to do these changes, but as we've been talking about, it's hard to change.
Yes.
How do you deal with that? And tell us a little bit about follow-up and encouraging people and what happens.
Well, I'll start with myself. I've learned to be very gracious with myself. A lot of us are perfectionists, and even if we're gracious to other people, we're really hard on ourselves. And I had to learn to cut myself some slack. You know, there are times when I'm going to make progress. There are times when I'm not going to make progress. Right. But the thing is, when you fall, you pick yourself up and keep going. When I work with folks, I am always their champion, their loving nudger, nudging them lovingly to be accountable to things, and giving them the space to grow, but I also hold them accountable, and it's about being there. I was writing something this morning, letting someone know that I will stand with you as you go for your vision. I can't do it for you, but I can stand with you. And I think that's what we need in our lives, whether it's a coach that you're paying, whether it's a friendship, whether it's your spouse. We need someone that will stand with us as we figure things out.
That's right. And failure is okay. And do you talk about that? Because when we fail, when we're courageous enough to try something new, if it doesn't work out, you still learn something from that. Do you deal with that with your people?
Absolutely. I remember reading an article that talked about kids, and kids that never failed anything in school ended up having a really hard time when they graduated because they did not learn how to pick themselves up after they failed. But a lot of the kids who struggled, they got that skill in life, so that if I messed up, I can pick myself up. It's not the end of the world, and I can keep going. And so it's about being gracious to yourself and really that reflection piece. So what did I learn? What did I miss? A lot of times we'll be going through things over and over and over again because we miss the lesson. And so that reflection of what did I miss? What can I focus on next time so that I can get there quicker and not have to stay in the same place?
Absolutely.
This is amazing. I mean, this is so profound, and especially the lesson of learning to handle disappointments. From a young age, it is so important for our children, for ourselves, because yes, I mean, if you grow up and you never fail, as an adult, it's like trying to shape a grown tree. And that just ends up breaking. And one of the things that I heard you say is being gracious to yourself is extremely important. And I think for me, that's a lesson that I'm continuing to learn every day. Are you finding that to be a big problem with a lot of women?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because there's so much pressure. There's pressure from your family to be a certain way. There are expectations from your spouse. There are expectations from your children. And so where do you find the time to show up and just be yourself? And if you're not, especially as a mom, I didn't get to take my kid to class. I didn't spend enough time. I didn't cook dinner. I brought food, from outside. All of those things are running through our minds. And
That's right.
I remember when I was a single mom for a long time. And people would get in my car like, oh, you need to clean your car. I'm like, you know what? My house is clean. I don't have the energy or time to focus on my car. I'm just gonna let it go. I could sit here and be worried about it, but say, you know what? Something's gotta go, and it's gonna be the car. I've got a toddler that's eating and throwing goldfish, juice boxes. We'll clean it up, once a week or every other week, but it is what it is. And so that was that being gracious to myself, but also setting that boundary for what I needed to give myself so that I wasn't going crazy.
How wonderful that you prioritize like that, because, tapping into what you said, I know I grew up with a sense that success and perfectionism were the goal, and failures and imperfection were seen as the end of the world. They really were. I really grew up thinking that was the end of the world. And it makes you very afraid to just step forward and take those small or bigger risks that would really improve your life and then, in extension, your children's. So I just find what you're saying so validating, and a message I think I could just hear a lot to overcome all of those things that I did learn in my childhood to be such a perfectionist. I need to hear that over and over. And do you find that true with your clients as well?
Yeah, we need those messages constantly. There's something that I've seen on social media where it talks about how Michael Jordan actually got cut from the basketball team, right? Or you think about J.K. Rowling and how successful she is, but she was on public welfare,
right?
And so when you take a look at stories about people who have overcome things, or it's not even necessarily overcome, but they grew through to where they are now, they evolved. Those are the kind of messages and examples that we need to see over and over and over again, because we're always battling those inner gremlins that tell you that you can't do that. You can't do it, you don't deserve it. That's not for you. And, and everybody has those, no matter if you are a CEO or you are the janitor. We all have those same gremlins inside that we have to deal with.
That's right. I hear you saying, there was a comment I heard recently that makes so much sense, that we need to learn to be human beings. We are not human doings.
Oh.
We are human beings, and you are helping us to learn to do that.
It's a wonderful thing to just be able to be. You know, there's an exhale with being that lessens the tension in your body and in your mind and in your spirit.
That's
so
right.
I wholeheartedly agree with being human beings.
That's right. Thank you.
I love also your word choices. When we were talking about, when you were saying evolve rather than overcome, overcome sounds like a lot of work to me, whereas evolving just seems like an organic process. So I love your word choices because although the definition may be very close or even the same, to me the connotations of the words that you choose, it really allows me to relax and breathe and just calm down, and that to me says it's much easier to take the next step.
Absolutely. You know, overcome is like a battle term.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know if I need to overcome anything within myself, because then I'm fighting myself,
Yes.
as opposed to evolving and letting go of those things that no longer serve me. And then my arms are open to whatever I need to receive so I can move forward.
Definitely.
One of the things that I think and say is, you know, if you never try, you've already failed, because there's so many people that are afraid to fail and don't try. Have you encountered people in your practice that are afraid of success?
Oh, absolutely. I've been afraid of success.
Tell us more about that.
Well, you know, one of the things that why I've had the fear of success is because it will separate you sometimes from your family and friends. You know, especially if you're one of those ambitious people, you know, like myself, you know, and it's not that the folks around you are bad or that they have bad intentions, but it's their own fear. And so they will say, well, don't you do that because you might be afraid. Well, that's you being afraid. I'm not afraid to do that. But if you want to go after success and then nobody else around you wants to go after that success, you can become afraid of it, right? Because if I show up and I'm just fantastic and wonderful, and then when I'm around you, you don't like that because it makes you feel upset and you feel bad. Now you're not going to want to be around me. But you're my family and I want you to be around me. And so that really that's been one of the roadblocks and challenges that I've had to face, and some of my clients have too.
Can you tell us more about fear? I think that's a huge element of what you're teaching, is that right?
It is. It's a big part of it. A lot of my clients have brilliant ideas. They're wonderful at what they do. And there's always this battle of, I want to show up and be visible, but I'm very afraid because then people will judge me, right? And then I'll be in the spotlight and all the things that people think that come with that.
Right.
I took a course about sacred depth training. And so it really helped me understand how to befriend your fear. And so that's one of the things, the techniques that I've helped people with is, how do you make fear your friend and not see it as an enemy? And part of that is being able to thank your fear, right? You know, I thank you for that fear that, you know, kept me from going in places I didn't need to go. But right now, I don't need to be afraid. And just having that simple shift can change how you think about fear. We're always going to have fear.
Right.
It's not a bad thing, but you can talk to it and put it in its place so that you can move on and make decisions that you need to.
Tai, I want to ask you about immigration because as a Korean adoptee, I obviously immigrated at a very young age. I was 2. And can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about it as it relates to fear.
Okay.
You know, I think it can be very intimidating to come into a place where the people may not look like you, they don't speak like you, they don't sound like you, they don't eat the same foods as you. Just think about the different smells and the different accents. There's so many differences, and that can be very intimidating, whether you're 6 or whether you're 60. You know, and so part of that kind of fear is being able to have a good support system. You know, if you want to manage that and handle that, and you've got to have a lot of courage to really just show up and be yourself in that instance.
So you moved from a different state to Minnesota.
Yeah.
So you obviously have experienced some sort of moving and migrating from one place to another. What helped you cope? Because when you moved to Minnesota, you moved on your own. You didn't know anybody. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that might help a little bit with the...
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't know anybody here. So it is very similar to somebody who would immigrate here. I needed a better place for my daughter, just like a lot of folks who come to this country. But you can be in a different state and want a better place. I grew up in Philadelphia. And as much as I believe in public schools and wanted my daughter to attend public school, that meant I had to move to a place where there were good public schools. And it was not so in Philadelphia. So that was one of the things that drew me to this area, was the schools, the colleges, lots of outdoor. I mean, there were just so many great things here, the theater. And so I decided to move, pick everything up, and I came here without knowing anybody. It was just me and my 6-year-old.
So we have a history of immigration in Minnesota. There's through the years we've developed quite a community of diverse people, between the Koreans who came during the war and after, the Hmong refugees who came, who have quite a population in St. Paul, and subsequent populations that have come through have really created a diverse atmosphere here. So my first question is, do you like the food? And secondly, did that really reflect on your move here at all?
Oh, absolutely. And when I took this test online. I don't know if it's still available, and it asks you all kinds of questions. You know, do you need to live in a Democratic or Republic place? Do you want to live near a college? Are sports important to you? It's about 4 pages of questions.
Yeah.
And first it said that Nebraska or North Dakota. I'm like, I'm not moving there. Portland, Oregon, which I could kind of see.
Oh, yeah.
And then Minnesota. And when I started doing research, it kept saying Minnesota is very diverse. And I'm like, really? And what I realized was it's not just about African American people, but it's the Hmong, it's Somali, it's the Koreans, all different kinds of people that are here. And I see that reflected in the different arts that are here, the shows, the performances, the food, and it really is a great thing.
Well, we are coming down with time, and I so appreciate this conversation. So where can we find more information about you, about your books, and some of what you're doing?
You can find me at TaiGoodwin.com. So it's just my name, TaiGoodwin.com. I'm also on social media, so you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm just out there connecting with people and sharing my story.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Tai. We've learned a lot today, and we'll definitely check out your resources. And to my co-hosts, Dawn and Glory, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it was delightful.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you, and join us again at Women of the World show.